What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Grassy TV, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be checking out my full build guide for the Fist of Heaven's Paladin in Season 6. Call down Divine Wrath with the Fist of Heaven's Paladin, a holy powerhouse that smites enemies with bolts of celestial energy. This build revolves around Fist of Heavens, making it perfect for clearing groups and dealing with heavy burst damage. With strong survivability, AoE dominance, and the ability to shred both mobs and bosses, the Paladin is a true champion of the light. In this guide, we'll cover the best skills, gear, and strategies to maximize your Fist of Heaven's Paladin, ensuring you strike down foes with a righteous fury. Prepare to unleash the heavens. A quick disclaimer before we get started: this guide was created during the closed beta phase of Season 6 and is based on the content mechanics available at that time. Please note that certain features or balance changes or any other game elements that may be updated or modified as the game progresses towards its official release. The information presented here may not fully reflect the final version of the game, and some aspects could be subject to change. While I strive to provide the most accurate and effective build recommendations, future adjustments by the developers may impact the viability of certain strategies. Always refer to the official patch notes for the latest insights. So let's get into some pros and cons of the Fist of Heaven's Paladin. First, you have very large AoE with projectiles that just go absolutely freaking everywhere. It is extremely easy to level this character. You have a built-in damage aura, several passives for damage reduction and sustain, as well as cast rate. And you have a built-in mana and health restoration skill. So you can change it. It can be mana or health on one click, and you can just restore back yourself. It's super convenient. However, this build does have a lot of screen clutter, and you may get some FPS issues or some lag if you're in, very large groups of enemies that unfortunately don't die really fast. It can cause some FPS dips. Your single target does take a pretty good amount of gear to be decent. We do have some single target options that we'll get into later in the guide, but initially, your Fist of Heavens isn't going to be the best single target skill. So there are some you're gonna need a lot of gear in order to really push the single target capabilities. You also do not have any sort of like built-in teleport, and that really makes a lot of these caster builds, really shine. Being able to teleport around, you do get access to teleport, and it's not too hard to get into. And there is also ball lightning. It's a movement skill that allows you to kind of jump, and you get a movement speed passive that gives you more base movement speed after you jump, and that's kind of nice, but it pales in comparison to be able to teleport, so you will have to build into teleport a bit sooner into the game if you really want to maximize your farming efficiency. So looking at our skills here, our main damage is going to be Fist of Heavens. This will call down a Fist of Divine Energy, exploding into multiple holy bolts, dealing arcane damage. We later augment this so that the Fist of Heavens will call them around us, and it'll hit enemies and cause them to explode even further. We do get a movement ability. It is Ball Lightning. Our damage aura is Holy Nova. This is going to give us magic skill damage for not only ourselves, but for our party, as well as attack damage. So if you are playing in a group with somebody that is an attack based build, this can affect them as well. You do have passives for increased mana, mana replenish, increased cast rate, and mana on kill for sustain, all very nice passives. And you do have a health or mana restoration skill that's Holy Nova. Again, we can change that to be health or mana from the sub skill tree. Now, in order to level this character, we do not gain access to Fist of Heavens until level 24. So I do recommend that you play a Lightning Paladin until level 24, and then you'll swap the Fist of Heavens leveling until level 60. Then you will obtain your first augment, right? So you'll want to supplement your early damage with a flat lightning skill damage until 24. Again, we are playing a Lightning Paladin. So in order to really, you know, beef up its damage and get us through those first 24 levels, flat lightning damage is going to be a very effective way. You can also use flat physical damage. So Vengeance is the main skill that we'll be using. It's a physical slash lightning hybrid skill, so you can scale it with lightning or physical. So just something to note. Now, be sure that you're picking up flat arcane damage as well while you're leveling up to 24, so that whenever you hit level 24, you actually have damage. You don't want to be in a situation where you hit level 24 and then you have no arcane items whatsoever, and you have to go farm arcane items on top of it. So just another little tidbit. So here's what our skill tree is going to look like. You're just going to dump all your points into Vengeance until level 8. Then we'll continue doing the same thing. You can dump all your points into Vengeance. Now, Vengeance does have some synergies. You can put points into uh, uh, Holy Shock. There it is. Sorry, Holy Shock War. You can put some points there just to get synergy For Vengeance, you can also put a point in Fanaticism. This is going to give you an attack speed buff. You can also put points into this passive here. I don't remember the name of it, but this gives you mana on kill. This will just help with that early sustain. But you do want to try and get as much damage out of Vengeance as you can early. I would recommend putting some points into energy early just to give you a bigger mana pool so that whenever you are killing enemies, you're getting maximum efficiency of your mana on kill. If you only have 50 mana and you use your skill 3 times and you run out of mana, you kill some enemies, sure, and you got some mana back, but you could have got more mana back, right? Maybe you have 200 mana. That's much more there's a lot more juice that you can get out of your mana at that point, a lot more attacks that you can get from your mana, be more efficient with it if you have a bigger pool. So it just helps a lot with that early leveling. Now, level 16, you can also dump 20 points into Holy Shock Aura if you would like to. Some people prefer that instead. You can just dump everything into Holy Shock Aura. You have this circle around you. You walk around. You hit enemies. They die. It's kind of like a Righteous Fire play style. It's just a walking simulator sort of build. This isn't going to work for bosses, but for that early stages, some people prefer to do that. I like to stay on Vengeance. I'll just dump the rest of my points into Vengeance, or I'll split between Vengeance and Holy Shock Aura because it's a synergy just to keep the mana cost on Vengeance low. It really depends on if you have a lot of early flat lightning and a lot of early flat physical and some leech for the physical to give you some sustain back. You can really get away with only having just maybe a few points here and then the rest into synergies, right? Just to keep your mana cost really, really low and spam it. And in that case, what I usually do is I'll dump all my points into Fanat. That way I can get the attack speed. So I'm just hitting way, way more with all those flats. So it really just kind of depends on where you're at with your gearing and what feels the best for you. But you're just struggling basically until you hit level 24 and everything will change. So at level 24, we do respect the Fist of Heavens. Be sure that you grab the extra projectiles in the sub skill tree. So we're just going to dump all of our points into Fist of Heavens. Make sure you get the sustain, the mana on kill passive. There's two passives here. This one's faster cast rate. It's nice to have. And this one's just additional mana, right? And then we also have our aura. This is Holy Nova. Excuse me. This is Holy Aura, right? This will give us magic skill damage. And then, yep, we have 1 point into our Holy Nova just to give us life and mana sustain. So at this level, I believe you'll only have it as a life sustain, which is still really nice. You don't have to spam your potions as much. You can just, if you get in a situation where maybe you're stuck, you can kind of spam on it and it'll honestly restore a pretty good amount back for you. But this skill is a screen wide skill. It's going to absolutely blast. Make sure that you get the extra projectiles in the sub skill tree here. It's going to zoom. Now, once we hit level 60, we do get our augment. This is going to change it to make the Fist of Heavens look like it looks like in the footage where it circles around you, kind of like you're playing a Hammered In from Diablo 2, but it's with holy bolts instead. But you'll just continue from here, maxing your holy aura, max your Fist of Heavens, and then put points into synergy. So I have 1 point into the venerated one. This gives you a bunch of cast rate on a toggle. So you'll have an active that you can press. It gives you a shitload of cast rate and then you'll just dump the rest of your points into Holy Bolt. I do have 1 point over here in a Ball Lightning. You can go this if you want to. Using it afterwards, you do get a pretty big movement speed buff after that. I personally still just don't like the skill, but that's up to you if you'd like to use that. At level 80, we continue on the same thing. We just finish with our synergies of Holy Bolt. And then from there, we will continue putting points into Venerated one for it's also a synergy, but it also gives us additional cast rate. And then here's our final level 100 Fist of Heavens tree. We have 20 points into Fist of Heavens, 20 points into Holy Aura, 20 points into Holy Bolt, 20 points into Venerated one. I have 1 point into Ball Lightning, 1 point into Divine Energy. I'm not really sure to remember what this is called. This gives you a huge magic damage reduction passive. So if maybe you're fighting Anubis and you know that he has his wrath coming down or the lightning waves coming, or you're just dealing with magic damage in general, you can tap this and it is so much freaking magic damage reduction. And then we just from there make sure that we put 1 point into our mana passive, our faster cast rate passive, and our Holy Nova. Obviously, we get that because of our Holy Aura is in that truck, right? And that's going to be our tree. Now, for a single target, we do run Holy Hammers. I'll be honest with you, at first, it's not that great. It does take a bit of gear before it'll start to shine as your single target skill. But essentially, you're just going to put 20 points into Holy Hammers and then all of its synergies. As you can see, I have it in this cast rate node, this mana on kill node, the Holy Aura node. We do take 1 point for the damage reduction, and then we dump the rest of our points into an one for more cast speed on that buff. So if you're not familiar with sub-skill trees, these are a new feature that came in season 5. You simply click on this plus sign in the top right of your skills. This will open up a new window. Now you gain 1 point for every 5 character levels for every skill that you have allocated. So when I look at this skill tree here, I'm not just gaining 20 points for this one skill. It's 20 points for every single skill that I have at least 1 point into that's unlocked, right? That's allocated. So you can reset this tree anytime for free. Listed below, I have all of my sub skill trees for this skill for this build. So first we have Fist of Heavens. This is our AoE version. So this tree focuses on maximum amounts of projectiles and AoE. So you can see down here in the bottom left, this is all of our projectiles. We get this node here makes them return back to us so they can bounce off of terrain and they'll return back to the point of impact. That'll give them a ton of extra damage, and obviously it brings them back to do damage again. This point up here also makes them it inflicts a slow on them, which is really nice. Now, whenever you need to do single target, here's what our Holy Hammer tree will look like. You can put this on your second loadout and just swap to your second loadout. Makes it quite easy. The main juice that we're getting out of this is right here. This gives us a ton of additional hammers on throw. And then this node here gives it an AoE proc every single time those hammers hits. And it's not on a cooldown. It's every instance of these hammers hitting gives it a proc. And it gives it a lot of extra damage. As well as we take a ton of arcane break right here. This is 50% arcane break. Essentially, arcane break gives it a more damage multiplier. So they take 50% increased arcane damage. For Holy Nova, this tree is used for magic find proc and a heal, right? So over here on this far left side, this is actually a 75% magic find buff while this buff is active on you. I believe it's for 3 or 4 seconds that this stays on you. You do have to recast it. Now, if you prefer to have this as a mana restoration skill, you can click this node right here. This turns it into a mana restoration skill. This can be really good on bosses to help you sustain. And then if you do decide to go with Ball Lightning, here's the tree that you'll use. This gives you a 40% movement speed buff after you use it, as well as you have a chance of it rendering you immortal for 3 seconds, which is honestly really strong. I just feel like it's very sporadic. It's not something that you consistently can keep up. So I don't know. It's not something I'm going to be spamming my Ball of Lightning to get a 3 second immortality buff. But if it does happen, I mean, it's kind of nice, but it does also require you to have to like pay attention to your character a bit more, like your bar up top. You do get like a little halo above your character whenever you gain this buff, which is nice. But I feel like sometimes there's just so much going on, you don't even see it anyway. So not something I prioritize, but you do get the 40% movement speed, which is very, very nice for whenever you're leveling. As far as our attributes go, skills early on can be quite expensive to use. So you want to put all your points into energy until you find your first arcane skill damage items or lightning skill damage items if you're playing with Vengeance, until you can find some sustain, whether it be mana on kill or if you're using Vengeance being a physical skill, you can also get mana leech and leech off of the attack damage of your weapon and the physical damage that you added to your character. Only physical damage can leech, by the way. So after that, you're going to follow a 50-50 split between intelligence and vitality. Do 2 points of intelligence, 2 points of vitality, and then enough energies for your character just to feel comfortable. Once you get to end game, you're going to spec all of your points into intelligence. There's probably not going to be a reason for you to have anything in vitality. You'll have enough just flat attributes, enough skill points, and that sort of thing to not really need any additional in vitality. Obviously, if you're playing hardcore, different situation, you might want to dump all vitality. Now, looking at gearing, this section is designed to give you workable suggestions on what gear to acquire at different stages of the game. You, as a player, need to look at your current gear and figure out what options make sense for you. Due to the addition of the sub skill trees, there will be item proc combos that are not listed here as they're not discovered yet. It's up to you to experiment. Now, pre level 24, since we're leveling with lightning, look for these affixes on gear to carry you. Don't forget to pick up arcane items as you level. So you're looking for things like lightning skill damage, resistance, life percent, energy, mana, some faster cast rate. Actually, we can change that. It kind of depends. Yeah, we'll probably want to go for attack speed. I mean, I could put both of them. I'm gonna put both because I don't want you to get to level 24 and not have some FCR on like rings and stuff. It's super easy to find FCR and rings now. They've changed some of the base types. So look for FCR, attack speed, life and mana on kill, int, movement speed. All of these things are very, very nice to get before you hit level 24. Once you hit level 24, for most of leveling, you'll be searching for rare or mythic items that match your character's damage type, but you may come across some satanics that make sense to use. I cannot guarantee you dropping any specific satanic, nor will you stop leveling to farm for a specific satanic, so my gear recommendations will not include them. However, rune words are nearly guaranteed as the bases are very common, and you can obtain any rune from completing quests in Act 1, Normal, Nightmare, or Hell, then using the prospect station in the top right of Act 1 to downgrade the runes to the ones that you need. This does not include the runes that you naturally drop playing the game. So for those of you that have played Diablo 2 or those of you that are familiar with runes, runes have a tier. They go from tier 1 all the way up to tier 36. Well, I guess there's angelic, so maybe 40, 41, something like that. Either way, so up to Vex rune, right? So we'll call Vex is 25. You can downgrade them, right? So one below Vex would be Gold, one below Gold would be Ist, one below Ist would be Mal. So you can downgrade these runes. So if you needed a Eth rune, as long as you have a rune that's higher than Eth, you can always downgrade it to get your Eth rune. So prospecting runes is really strong to do while you're leveling. That's also why those quests in early Normal, Nightmare, Hell are important because they give you just random runes that are up to in the red runes that you can use to drop down to ones that you actually need. Be sure that you check the runes level requirement and the white bases level requirement to be sure that you meet both before making rune word. The endgame journal is a bit misleading, the minimum level requirements for starter rune words. So be sure you check for yourself. So essentially what this means when you open up the journal, you'll see that most of the rune words require level 52. That's incorrect for most of them. As if they're not using a high rune, they're not required to be level 52 to use. They just show that because the base of the item is level 52, right? So this is an S tier base. If it was made on a D tier base, it might not be. Maybe it's level 29 to wear it. So the rune itself has a level requirement and the base itself has a level requirement. Make sure you check both of those. As long as you're over that, then you're good. Now, for these different items that we're looking for while we're leveling, since we're not going to be able to guarantee any sort of satanics, we're generally just looking for specific affixes on items, right? We're looking for all skills, arcane damage, arcane skills, arcane or magic skill damage, faster cast rate, flat damages, life and mana on kill for sustain, intelligence, because intelligence in this game is also magic skill damage at a 1-to-1 ratio. Energy or mana, especially on charms, very strong just to have a bigger mana pool so we can continue, using our skill as much as possible. You can also get things like movement speed in different places, like weapons or armors can get movement speed. So I'm just going to kind of go through these different options here. On weapons, you can also get a Sky Song. This is your rune word option for weapons. On offhands, our rune word options are also Sky Song on a shield or Divine Contemplation. This gives us a ton of resistances early. For chests, we have Shadow or Angle Oxwana. So Shadow is, you can wear this as early as level 17. And it's like basically the stealth of Hero Siege. It gives you a ton of faster cast rate and a ton of movement speed. Angle Oxwana is huge. You get a ton of all skills as well as some pen and arcane skill damage. For gloves, we're just looking for the affixes. Boots, we can go for quick steps. These are extremely cheap, and Yemena Delrune are free, 99. Make a quick step, they're going to give you a ton of movement speed. Now, Ghost is your better option, but you're probably not going to find the early Malrune. If you're able to get an early Malrune, make sure that you use a base that's somewhat decent. 'Cause you don't want to waste the Malrune. For belts, we're just looking for affixes. For rings, just looking for affixes. Amulets, just looking for affixes. And charms, just looking for affixes. Charms are extremely important for leveling. They offer so much variety and utility to your leveling process, just from all the flats you can get. You can get FCR, you can get resistances, you can get life percent, mana percent, sustain, intelligence, movement speed, enhanced defense, which, by the way, enhanced defense is a super underrated affix. You can get faster hit recovery, another big one that's super underrated while leveling. That way, when you get hit by something, you can recover from that hit and get out of the way so you don't get hit six more times. All these things are super important to early leveling. Do not underestimate how strong charms can be. So once we hit level 100, at this point, we are now in our early game. So this section is designed to give you gear choices for a fresh level 100 character. At this point, there's really no best in slot gear. Most of the items can be swapped out with strong mythics. Item decisions are going to really revolve around how your character feels over direct power upgrades. For example, if your character has a built-in teleport but low cast rate, choosing items that have a faster cast rate than others may make the build feel smoother over just getting, raw power. You could really put a combination of any of these budget items together and feel capable of completing hell difficulty and start pushing. That's really the goal of this budget section, is to get you through hell one, get you through hell difficulty so that you can unlock satanic zones and start farming either the satanic zones or in this early stage of the game. But do not underestimate how powerful these early mythic items can really be. So again, for weapons, Sky Song is a super strong, very cheap rune word. Try and find one with maybe like an intelligence or intelligence per level, magic skill damage, or a plus skills base. You don't have to, but these can give you a little bit of extra juice on the weapon. Same goes for divinity. If you find a lucky Vex, you can make two of these. Paladin can actually dual wield divinities. So that's really nice. But these give you up to, or excuse me, these give you four skills, faster cast rate, and up to 40 all res. A poor man's divinity is Dragon Knight's Flail. This is three skills, 40 FCR, some all res. It's literally a divinity, just a little bit less stats on it. For offhands, same thing. We have Sky Song as our shield. You can also get Divine Contemplation. This is probably what I would recommend the most. It just gives you a ton of resistances. Moving into season six, they really nerfed down how much resistances that you get on items. So this will help a ton. Rift Die. This has been buffed in season six. So you can see we get up to five skills, some FCR, a ton of mana, a ton of arcane skill damage. Really nice item. Gem Encrusted Tower is my preferred item, especially if you're playing hardcore, as you do get physical damage, magic damage reduction, a ton of resistances, and six sockets. So you can add six runes into this, which is 42 all res, right? On top of this. So it's very, very nice. For helmets, we have Scholar. Scholar gets honestly overpowered very, very quickly. You'll want to try and get Crown of the Midnight, Curator Secrets, Witch's Brimmed Hat. Any of these are very strong S tier helmets that you can rock. I would say Witch's Brimmed Helm is the best option here, just because you get the penetration, and getting pen going into season six is a little bit harder. And it really just helps maximize your damage more than, getting more magic skill damage or um, really anything else, just plus skills, right? It's a really, really strong stat. However, Curator Secrets having the 20 all res is also very interesting, right? I would say that Crown of the Midnight is probably the most damage early. If you get like a high roll here, like a three, 25 plus is probably more damage than a Witch's Brimmed Hat. But yeah, very, very good options all around. For chest, Angle Oxawana is your best option. So going to be the most damage. It's got four skills on it: FCR, pen, arcane, skill damage. It's really everything that you need. right? The next best option would be Heaven's Might, especially if you get one that has 4 skills on it with 6 sockets. This also comes with physical damage and magic damage reduction. It's a super, super strong chest. You can put a bunch of armor runes in there and get even more res. You can put just different things in the sockets to really help your character out. Lichbane's an okay option if you run into a cheap one. Grand Wizard's Robe, also just a cheap option if you run into one. It's got 2 skills, FCR or PDR, bunch of all res with 3 sockets. Can be a good option. Gladstone Goose has, I know this says 65, but it's been changed. It's 52 all res. That's really, really good to have early. This is really just like a cheap rune word to make. Like, hey, I just need resistances so I can stop dying in L1 or wherever you're at. I would go for just a cheap Gladstone Goose off the ground. For gloves, we have Conjured Mitts, Anubis's Mighty Hands, Mevius's Mighty Hands, Wisdom Holds, Sorcerer Surge Grips. Any of these will serve you well. Personally, I prefer Wisdom Holds, but any of these will do just fine. As a note here, Mevius's shows lightning skills. It can roll with any element type, so you can find one that's +3 arcane. For boots, we have Quick Steps, Cheap Movement. You really want to try and probably get into a ghost. Ghost is just going to feel a lot better just because early on you don't have that teleport. So just being able to run and gun through things with the movement phasing that you get from ghost is going to feel really, really nice. You also get 2 skills on it and some physical and magical damage reduction. So you'll feel a bit tankier. You can go for Grand Wizard Silk Shoes. These are okay. I don't know. I really wouldn't go this unless you had teleport. And Hermes is actually decent with the up to this has 70% movement speed on it, up to 40 all res. So these are actually a pretty decent option as well. For belts, we have Viper Magi, Knight's Girdle, Commander Sash, Sash of the Magi, all good options. Knight's Girdle probably has Knight's Girdle may be the most damage, but kind of not because Sash of the Magi got buffed. So now it has the 25% magic skill damage and a bit more FCR. So Sash of the Magi is probably my preferred option. You can get a ton of all res with Commander Sash. It's up to 20%. You need to fix a res. That's really, really nice. Same thing for Viper Magi. It's 15 all res. So all these are good. For rings, Kodo's wedding bands are fantastic. You probably run 2 of those, especially if you're wearing ghosts, allow you to phase through enemies. You can just zoom with up to 30% movement speed on both of those, a ton of life. If you want some more faster cast rate, if you feel like you're not, the build doesn't feel smooth and you want a bit more speed, the Iron Ring of Prometheus offers a ton of faster cast rate. You might also run maybe one Kodo's Wedding Band and one Satanic Eye just to get the all res here. So you can get res cap a bit easier. Or a Ring of the Talisk also gives you some life with the skill. Absence of Constraint, up to 25 all res, 25 faster cast rate, and some arcane skill damage. These can be very nice. If you have a decent mana pool, which because you're playing a paladin, you have a passive that gives you a ton of mana, you can defer some of the damage that you take to your mana. So that can help with just feeling a bit tankier from certain element types or fizz hits, whatever it may be. For amulets, any of these options are great. Dark Lord Sigil is my preferred option just because you get 2 skills up to 30% arcane skill damage. You could also go All Seeing Eye, it's 3 skills and some Magic Find. If you want all res, Spirit Pendant up to 30% all resistance, or Shining Pearl has 50% magic skill damage. So all these are great options. Last but not least, for our budget charms, we're really just looking to get as many mythic charms in as we can. With if you find some all skill ones, they're very rare, but you might be able to pick up a cheap one. Otherwise, you're gonna look for all res or resistances, life percentage, magic skill damage. Enhanced defense is much stronger than people give it credit for, especially if you find an Angle Oxwana with a high defense base on it. You make like a 1600 defense Angle Oxwana. You could put on a bunch of enhanced defense charms and give yourself even more defense. This will help you dodge those physical attacks and projectiles. It's really nice. This is supposed to be cast speed. So cast speed, movement speed, life and mana on kill. All those are good options. For Satanic Charms, I want to change that real quick. For Satanic Charms, they're really not an early buy. They're going to be quite expensive, but I do want to show you a couple. Moonshard has been changed in season 6. It is now an SS tier Satanic, so finding one, it's going to be much harder. But they are so damn important to these elemental builds or just caster builds that I still am even going to put it in the budget section because I want to give it as much light as I can. I want to show it off as much as I can to people about like, hey, this stat is very important. You can also get this affix on charms. So in here as an additional option, minus enemy arcane, I can type resistance. You can also get this just on purple charms, and it's very, very strong. So getting this up to, you want to try and get 100% minus enemy arcane resistance so that you can just penetrate all of it. So that they have 10,000 res, right? It reduces all the way down to zero. Very, very strong stat. Another cheap pickup is Damien's Cage. It's got 3 skills on it with up to 35 intelligence. Really good charm to get early on. So once we have all of that, let's move on into our mid game section. So in order to scale an arcane caster, there's several aspects that you're going to need to understand. First is increased arcane skill damage. This is a direct damage multiplier on your skill's base damage. So a similar mod to this would be magic skill damage, which includes all elemental damage types: cold, fire, lightning, poison, arcane. Intelligence increases your magic skill damage by 1% per 1 intelligence. And all of these sources are important to scale up and are added together before multiplying your base damage. So, to give you an understanding of this, if you had 1,000 base damage on Fist of Heavens, right? From there, you would take your increased arcane skill damage, you would take your magic skill damage, and you would take the magic skill damage that you gained from your intelligence. And all three of those are added together. They're the same stat, essentially. Then that number is multiplied by the 1,000 base damage, right? So gaining more base damage is done through soft points and hard points. Hard points are capped at 20. It's when you physically click on a skill, you can only click at 20 times. Those are hard points. Versus soft points are uncapped and are gained through plus skills on your gear. It's important to note that plus skills generally has no diminishing returns versus percent skill damage does. Now we can continue scaling this damage even further with faster cast rate, which literally increases the amount of casts that you're doing. And the more that you're casting, the more damage you're doing. Faster cast rate does have a soft cap of 150, which then you will start having a diminishing return. So I think on my Paladin at one point I had like 900% FCR, but after diminishing returns, it came down to 250% faster cast rate. So you want to get as much cast rate as you possibly can without losing much value in other places, right? You don't want to be dumping so much into faster cast rate, but then you just don't have sources of percent skill damage or skills, whatever it may be, to scale up your damage because it has such a hard diminishing return. But hitting those like soft cap numbers is super important. Now, monsters in Hero Siege have elemental resistances. We kind of already talked about this. In order to reduce them, you'll need sources of minus enemy arcane resistance. This is not a res difference, this is a reduction. So, if you obtain 100% ignore arcane resistance on a monster that has 10,000 arcane resistance, the monster will have zero resistances when you have 100% minus enemy arcane resistance. So, it's also important to note that monsters cannot go below 0% resistance. The last couple of pieces of this puzzle are Arcane Break. Sheesh. Yeah, the last couple of pieces of the puzzle are Arcane Break and extra damage to burning monsters. So Arcane Break is basically like a curse. If you apply a 50% break to a monster, it will take 50% increased damage from the element that is stated, right? So we apply 50% arcane break, and now it takes 50% increased arcane damage. Now, different sources of a elemental break typically don't stack. So if you have 4 skills that apply an arcane break, you can't get 250 arcane break from these 4 different skills. It's each skill individually. You can only have one of those skills actually apply its break to that monster. Then you have extra damage that multiplies all the previous values as a more damage multiplier. One of the easiest ways of doing this is through burning monsters. You can apply a burn on a monster and then get sources of extra damage to burning monsters. This is this is a more damage multiplier after all of this happens. It's the very last thing in this entire formula, and it's a more damage multiplier, if you will, right? Very, very strong. All of these mods are important for scaling the damage of an arcane caster and need to be balanced as you're gearing. So looking at the gear of our mid game, starting with weapons, Divinity and Celestis should be made on a plus skills base. Blood Moon is really just for faster clear when you already have enough damage, and Dawnbringer is our best in slot. So you can see over here we have a Divinity, we have a Celestis. You want to have plus skills bases, so you have a +9 Divinity or a +10 Celestis essentially. If you find a Dawnbringer, you can afford a Dawnbringer. This is your best in slot. And Blood Moon Crescent can be good if it rolls with arcane skills, right? It also gives us a skill movement diminish decrease. So if you don't have a source of teleport yet, you can use this as a way just to walk through enemies, right? Because it does give you movement phasing, a ton of movement speed. So that can be a decent option. For offhands, you're most likely going to want to use a Celestial's Authority for the minus enemy arcane resistance. We get up to 60% minus enemy arcane resistance. That's a massive number to get from one item. But we do have some other options. A +5 skills base shield with a Justice rune word is up to 31 skills to Holy Hammer if star leveled. You can see we have the Holy Hammer here. This can be really good for your single target, as well as it has just some basic plus skills on it, some movement speed, a bunch of resistances, cannot be frozen. It can be a decent option, maybe on a back bar for whenever you swap to fighting bosses. Suomi Finland Perkel is also decent, right? Up to 6 sockets, 4 skills, faster cast rate. It comes with some all res, and you could socket in some additional all res in the sockets. Super nice option. Same thing for Ancient AGs can be okay as well. 3 skills, so magic skill damage, a ton of all res, and up to 2 sockets. And then last but not least, I still put Gem and Crescent Tower here just because it is such a good hardcore option with the physical damage and the magic damage reduction. So we do have that in here as well. But overall, Celestial's Authority is really just going to offer so much um, of everything that you need. The arcane skill damage, the pen, the all res, the sockets. It's definitely a very, very good shield for the mid game. Looking at helmets, Side of the Gods has the most value by far by granting you the ability to teleport. But there are some other options, just kind of depending what you need. If you don't want to go the teleport route, Harlequin Veil can give you some magic find with some all res and up to 5 skills. Curse is decent as well with some all res. You get some. You have to roll this to get arcane skills. Unfortunately, it does randomly roll a skill element, so this can be an okay option. And then last but not least is Delirium Tremens. This can give you up to +8 skills with a ton of mana. Very, very nice helmet, just with a lot of plus skills, which is a ton of base damage and just a lot of damage, right? This is going to be a more damage option than Side of the Gods, but obviously Side of the Gods offers us teleport, so right, you'll have to weigh that decision for yourself. For the chest, most casters look to get Enigma for teleport. Make it on a plus skills base. So you can see here's our Shroud of Enigma. We have +1 teleport. Generally, what will happen here is if you go Enigma, you won't go Side of the Gods or run a Delirium. So just keep that in mind. If you end up running a Side of the Gods, maybe you decide not to go the Enigma, and then you'll go a Gem King's Garb instead, and then you'll put six. You'll put six. I put amethyst rubies. Huh? 6 amethysts in it for all the. This will actually give you +6 to arcane skills. It'll give you a ton of arcane skill damage. Also give you a bunch of cooldown recovery. I didn't have a picture of this one, so that's what we got here. The last option here is Isarius's Ironthorn Breastplate. This is going to be a good hardcore option just because it gives you a ton of all res, up to 4 skills, or up to 4 sockets, up to 5 skills, a bunch of extra damage to stunned monsters built into Fist of Heavens in the sub skill tree, you take these points by default. So you have a chance to stun enemies. So this will give you some extra damage, which is very fucking strong. And then you have the all damage taken reduced by up to 16%, which is just a very, very tanky mod to have. So very good for hardcore. Moving on to gloves. Arcanum Asphyxiators is generally your best in slot just because it gives us Ominous Aura. This is a magic skill damage aura. But there are some other options here. If you draw Fighter Magi's, these are okay. Shadow Cultist Grabs, these give you some additional magic skill damage on a proc with some pen. And then you have Spell Weavers, and these can roll. This is an elemental roll. This can roll arcane skills, not just lightning. So you get some all res on here. You get some that damage goes to mana. If you have a thick mana pool, and kind of defer some of that damage. It can be kind of a tanky option as well. Like I said, generally speaking, you want to get arcanums. They're just insane. 6 skills, FCR, arcane skill damage, and then the ominous are on top of that. It's everything that we want for gloves. For boots, ideally you want to go ether walks with arcane skills rolled, but a you could also look at Fumas can be decent just because you have the skilled movement diminish. It also gives you a bunch of arcane skills. These can be an okay option. Obviously, I would probably just make an ether walk even on a regular base. We don't even need a plus skill base just because it offers so much with the pin, the magic skill damage, mana, damage goes to mana, just offers so much. And Fumas is more of a just kind of a niche. I dropped one or I was able to pick one up for cheap and I'm not using teleport or whatever it may be. You can just kind of run through enemies. For belts, Rugal's is a very, very strong for both damage and takiness. So you can see this gives us 30% all resistances, a bunch of physical damage reduction, up to 18% pen, and 20 magic skill damage. This is going to be fantastic for the mid game. It's probably what you're going to need in order to end up rounding out your pen. But Cunninglingham Singalulum can roll any class skills. If you find a decent rolled sash, this could work. So you can see this has +2 to redneck on it. It could be +3 to paladin, as well as you get up to 30 attributes on there, which is magic skill damage. And last but not least, if you end up running Uber Damien and find a decent Sash of Eternal Hatred with, plus arcane skills with some FCR, or maybe find some all res on there, whatever it may be, this can be a decent option as well. You can also get pen, some minus enemy arcane resistance on this belt as well. For rings, boss rings were moved to Inferno difficulty, so you can hate yourself and try and farm out a soul gem if you have a +3 Azazels. But Azazel's has also been nerfed in its drop rate, so it's going to be much harder to find a +3 Azazel's, and you're not going to use it on a non +3 Azazel. If you happen to find or you can afford a St. Aaron's, this is going to be a insane option as well. The other option would be just a mythic ring, right? If you found a plus skills mythic ring on the ground, that would be an okay option as well. Now, if you do end up getting a Azazel's or whatever it may be, you can farm out a Rakul. This is from the Chaos Tower. It's King Rakul in the Chaos Tower. It's the boss in there. Killing him has a chance of dropping Rakul's band, which is it basically mirrors your other ring. That would give you 2 Azazels. Otherwise, you can go for a Quickening Zephyr. This just gives you a ton of movement speed, but you want to make sure that you buy one that's plus skills to Paladin, and that can be okay. Otherwise, you don't really have much of another option until you get to Inferno difficulty and can farm out Arcanus rings. For amulets, all these options are good. You can farm Ibridamian to Rethiel's Falls. Uh, those you can get lucky on. You might find one that has plus skills on it, maybe some extra attributes, maybe some pen, FCR, all res. You can definitely get some different things on a Terethiel's from Ibridamian. Pendant of Eternity is going to be just really, really nice for zooming around with, just because you get the venerated one on a proc, so you don't have to press it yourself. It just goes off on its own. You get some additional FCR in there and some magic skull damage. So this can be a good option if rolled well. Personally, I would probably go Philosopher's Stone for most of it, just because it has the up to 4 skills, all res, and up to 40 attributes. It's just a solid amulet option. Here's a list of a bunch of charms, and there's a ton to look out for while you're grinding. You can also find very strong mythic charms with plus skills, magic skill damage, intelligence. For Tablet of the Awakening, you'll want to go either for elemental gems or runes. So, for those of you that don't know how this works, these are socketables. This one right here looks a little bit different because it gives you a 1.5x multiplier and whatever you use on it. So generally, runes are 7% resistances. Putting a rune in this socket here would give you 10% or whatever it may be. So yeah, so I think it's 34 total res for 7 runes in here. There's definitely several more charms that are available here as well. You can see Annihilator, the Arcane Pumpkin, the Torsine's Anvil, Fulgurite, Loaded Dice. These all give like plus skills, different arcane skill damages or arcane skills, attributes, all res. There's a ton of options in here. They're all going to be expensive. So really, you want to use your mythic charms as best as you can, and some of these budget charms to fill out your charm area the best that you can, and then start working towards some of these more expensive options. Now, looking at the end game, when it comes to min-maxing a character, there are a lot of variables to consider, as well as people having different playstyles and goals with their characters. Starting in season 6, Hero Siege will have a new item called the Satanic Crystal. When cubed with an item, it will either add a new affix or destroy your item. This takes min-maxing a character to a whole new level. As of right now, I do not have a list of possible corruptions, so my gearing recommendations will not include them. So this section will include a build I use for in-game testing, but can be pushed further with the new season 6 features or mythics that I was unable to obtain. So, looking at my recommended setup, this end game build is a result of my testing and refinement, and I can confidently vouch for its effectiveness. However, builds are always subject to change to personal preference, specific encounters, and evolving strategies. There may be more optimal variations depending on your playstyle, the zones that you're tackling, or bosses that you're facing. Feel free to experiment and adapt. This guide serves as a strong foundation, but the best build is the one that works for you. So here's my current end game setup. I did not have charms. I guess I could have just put charms there, but these would be +5 Paladin charms, right? I also am missing a relic here. This would be a Holy Bible. And here is what that gear looks like. Something to note here, I put El Patron's belt, right? This is extremely, extremely, extremely rare. It is going to be part of the in-game min-max because that's what you would get to min-max a character, but it has a 1 in 50 million drop chance. To put this in perspective, those of you that know Tyraels is 1 in 24 million. So this is twice as rare as the most rare item in the game currently. For relics, here's a list of relics that work with the build. You may drop Triforce just because it no longer provides 30 all res. It only provides up to 10 all res at level 10, as well as the Lost Wand gives you 40 FCR. Paladin gets a lot of FCR for free, so you might end up dropping Triforce and Lost Wand, going like Holy Grail with Book or Holy Grail with Steam Sale, or different options in there. For potions, here's a list of satanic potions. You have a ghostly potion for enhances your magic skill damage. A wizard potion will give you cast rate. Amon Ra's demise will give you explode on kill. Elixir of Unworldly Cognition is now a SS tier, but it does give you increased experience. Witch's Potion is just a oh shit button, gives you life and mana instantly. The Gold Inlaid gives you Magic Find. It is now an angelic potion. Empty Bottle of Vodka will give you plus skills, and Bottle of Rodagake will give you increased movement speed. If you do end up finding a source of burn on the build, this caffeinated coffee container is OP because it'll give you increased damage to burning targets. For chest augments, we have two options. Longevity or monstrosity are the best for damage. I would say that longevity is probably going to be your best for clear. Monstrosity is going to be your best for single targets. So you may end up having a chest that you'll swap out for damages. But maybe you just decide to go monstrosity the whole time or just go longevity the whole time. That's up to you. Survivor Shield's amazing for hardcore, so it gives you a cheat death basically. And Spell Singler is a great way to get a ton of FCR for teleporting. Probably not going to need this. It does give you some magic skill damage as well, but if you decide to drop a lot of your FCR um, and replace it with other stuff, you just feel like you don't have FCR for whatever reason, Spell Slinger could be a good option as well. For hero levels, I do have a whole guide on hero levels because the tree generally provides utility over character power. So it can be very situational. I do have a video linked in the description that will describe the different paths that you'll take based on your character's situation, as well as there are glyphs that you can get to enhance your gameplay. Currently, glyphs, again, they don't provide any direct player power, so making their selections are entirely preference based, depending on which content that you wish to engage with. I do have a video showcasing all of the glyphs and talking about them, showing you what they do. I'll have that linked in the description as well. For the mercenary, I would use the Act 1 Knight Merc. Currently in season 6, the Mercs only have one general purpose of it's just being a Magic Find bot. So mercenaries Magic Find is applied to your on kill Magic Find, so you gain theirs for yourself. So we'll be stacking as much Magic Find as we can. Here's a snippet of the skill tree that you'll use for your mercenary. Basically, just damage reduction, life on hit, life regen, armor, that sort of thing. For weapons, we have a bunch of Magic Find weapon options, scaling all the way up to Death Smear. Death Smear is now an SS Satanic, so it's going to be. It did get a bit of a buff. I believe it has 3 sockets now and it has more Magic Find. Aura's Might can be a really good option early for a huge resistance aura. I personally just don't like relying on my Merc for res because they die to dumb stuff. So if you're not playing hardcore or if you just don't care, then Aura's Might can be a really good way to cap out your reses. For chess pieces, we have Oopies, Empires, and Mystic Allure. All these stay the same. And Mystic Allure is your best option here, but I mean, really, any of these are fine. For helmets, we have Harley Quinn's Crest, Harley Quinn's Veil, the bucket. The bucket is now an SS tier, but it does have up to 5 sockets and it got buffed on its Magic Find. Harley Quinn's Crest, very cheap option, up to 30 Magic Find. And Harley Quinn Veil, not a cheap option, but you could also go this. It does get up to 50 increased Magic Find, and you can put a bunch of, you can put Umrins in there if you want to give your Merc res. Probably just put a bunch of Ists and all this stuff to give it more Magic Find. And for offhands, we have Den Glider Inn, Wall of the Legion, Leprechaun's Greed, and a Novice Tower. Leprechaun's Greed is now an SS tier. It did get a buff. I believe it has 5 sockets now, and it's Magifying got buffed. Like you'll want to put Ists in it. Same for all of these. Novice Tower goes up to 4 sockets now, and also has up to 20% Magifying. This is probably sorry, plus another 20 up to 45% Magifying. This is probably what I'm going to shoot for at the start of the season, just because it's got it. It's great. Put 4 Ists in that, you're rocking a pretty good a pretty good shield. Now for loot filters, to make highlighting items easy, I'll quickly explain how to add a filter in less than 30 seconds. First, you'll press escape, go to options, gameplay, and then loot filter. Your screen should look like this. On the bottom right, you're going to select Arcane Caster. Arcane Caster. Now, while you're leveling up early in the game, you might want to select Lightning Caster, just so you can find lightning gear and then edit it yourself to add in some arcane. But either way, you want to make sure that you're on the Arcane Caster highlight preset. And then on the left side here, you have the filter settings with several different presets. I recommend following the presets based on the difficulty that you're in. So if you're in normal, you'll click on normal. If you're in nightmare, you'll click on nightmare. If you're in hell, you'll click on hell. I will have a video linked in the description for all of my filters on starting, as well as in-game filters, so that I can show you exactly how I build my filters on League Start. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to just give you a filter. There's way too many things that happen per character, and on top of that, whenever the patches come out for the season start, they don't work. I have to go through right before season starts. I have 15 minutes to update every single filter that I have, and it's just so insane to think that I can even do that. So I will just make a video explaining how I make my filters for each archetype. So you can follow that if you'd like to. Otherwise, you will need to follow this here for your highlight and your loot filter. If you're new to Hero Siege, for sure you check out my Ultimate Beginner's Guide. Made a 2.5 hour video with timestamps to practically anything that you would want to know in Hero Siege. That'll be linked in the description below. Before you get started, be sure that you equip your companion. Everyone gets one for free. Set up your highlight filter, configure your controls. Here's my current settings for those controls if you'd like to copy me. I also suggest that you change your minimap hotkey to tab. This will make your minimap overlay permanent, like Diablo 2 or PoE. Be sure you swap your FPS to 60, even if you have a super beefy computer. Trust me, you won't see a difference, but your performance will be fantastic. And then the bottom here, this just kind of gives you an idea of how you can open up your skill bar to assign skills to different buttons. Now, if it's your first time leveling in Hero Siege, this will kind of give you an example of how you should level with additive damage versus skill damage. When you very first start your character, you do not have a lot of skill points to beef up the damage of your main skill. To compensate for this, the game has sources of flat damage to spells or attacks via affixes like plus X to plus X skill damage or additive damage. So to show you here, this one here is flat to spells, which is what we are using with Fist of Heavens. This one here, the additive damage, is for melee attacks. So this one you can use early for your vengeance, right? And then later you will want things like this for your Fist of Heaven spell. Now, this isn't completely true because skill damage also does work with melee attacks if the melee attack has an element tied to it. It's not so much that it's spell damage, right? It is skill damage. So because Vengeance has a lightning tag on it, we can scale the damage of the lightning skill element essentially with sources of lightning skill damage as well as additive damage for our melee weapon attack. So it's technically both. It has to be specifically lightning damage. Now, while you're leveling up, outside of completing each act and moving forward through the campaign, there are zones that you can farm for gear upgrades and experience. You do not have to follow this, as some classes do have a bit more power early on and can directly skip to higher difficulty zones and dungeons. But basically, if you needed to get some additional experience, or if you needed to farm out for some different items, these are some good places that you can go to gear up or get XP or whatever it may. Personally, I like to farm in Nightmare. I usually try and rush to Rat Den. In Nightmare, I farm this out until I get level 60 for my first augment. Then I push all the way to level 60. The same thing, just hit Rat Den. Before that, typically we rush. You rush Rat Den at the start normal, and then I'll push all the way to either Sand Cave. Some people like 3-3. Um, Whenever you get up to Act 5, there's Mount Fuji. Some people like Temple Trapdoor. It's in Temple of Zamjo. So really, you're just looking for dungeons around your character level to go over level with or find some gear. But these are the main ones that I prefer to use while I'm leveling. Now, when you're questing, there are no required quests to complete each difficulty, but there are some that can give you supplies for early gearing. So here's some of the quests that I recommend that you complete. Act 1 Normal, Act 1 Nightmare, Act 1 Hell. These will give you runes up to Vex for most of these quests, as well as Act 1 Normal will give you a movement speed charm and a movement speed potion that can be really good, especially if you don't have a teleport on your character, which for Vista Heavens we don't. This can be a really nice option for zooming around early on. Next, we have our damage formula. We kind of already talked about this in the mid game section. This will just give you some additional information on how you can scale up your damage for those of you that need a bit of additional information on maybe how to get more damage. I'm not going to read through this again. I will hover over each of it so that you can pause and read through this if you would like to. Season 6 is hopefully starting in March. Right now, our ETA is March 14th. This could be obviously a little bit later, could be a little bit sooner. We don't really know. I'm kind of expecting to have an announcement soon as we're getting to the end of February. So sooner than later, we will have information on that. However, here is a link to the official season 6 patch notes that are live during the beta. Whenever the beta starts, they basically have a blank slate, and as the beta progresses, they update these patch notes as things change and are added, and whatever happens in the beta. So I will have a link to these patch notes in the description for you guys to check out and read. As well as there is an official Hero Siege wiki, and that's not the fandom. I know a lot of people are still using the fandom or look at the fandom, and it's a bit misleading. So be sure that you're using this official Hero Siege wiki link. I will have this in the description as well. Now, if you just hit level 100 and you're not really sure what you should be doing, I do have a entire video dedicated to early game progression tips and tricks from level 100 and on. Because I have a lot of people that'll come to my stream and ask me like, "Yo, Grax, I just hit level 100. Now what do I do?" They're expecting like a mapping system, or they're expecting, something PoE esque. And currently, the game doesn't offer a mapping system, so there are different things that you will do in this game than like PoE or whatever it may be. So I do have a ton of tips and just different things that you can read through here to learn the early progression of Hero Siege and just different things that you can do in the game. Again, I'll have a link to this video with this entire guide in a separate video, and the link will be in the description for you guys. Also, there's the Hero Siege Helper app. This is a really cool website made by Seiko. I have a whole video discussing this helper app if you want some information on what it is and the different tabs that it has. It's a really, really cool website. He's continuing to update it. So be sure that you bookmark this. I will have a link in the description for this as well. Yeah, with that being said, that's going to wrap up this full build guide for the Fist of Heaven's Paladin in Season 6. Be sure that you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed this content, if you found it helpful. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.